I woke up alone in that hospital room, my newborn crying, my husband gone. He'd walked out hours after I gave birth, choosing his mother's racism over our family. But by sunrise, a phone call would arrive that would make him crawl back, and I'd make sure he'd regret every step he took away from us. If you've ever felt abandoned when you needed someone most, stay with me. This story gets so much deeper than you think. Hit that like button if you're already feeling this, and let's dive in together. Let me take you back to where this all began, because you need to understand how deeply I loved this man, how much I believed in us. My name is Diana, and 3 years ago, I was a pharmaceutical research scientist completely absorbed in my work. I lived and breathed the lab, chasing breakthroughs that could save lives. I wasn't looking for love when I met Garrett at a medical conference in Boston. He was a hospital administrator with this easy charm and a smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We talked for hours that first night about everything except work. He made me laugh. He made me feel seen. Our romance moved fast, maybe too fast, but when you're falling, you don't question the speed. Within 6 months, he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. But there was this shadow that followed us everywhere. His mother, Christine. From our first meeting, she looked at me like I was something temporary, something that would eventually wash away. She never said anything explicitly racist, not at first. It was the small things. The way she touched my natural hair with this forced curiosity, like I was exotic rather than human. The comments about how interesting our children would look. The emphasis she put on me taking Garrett's last name, as if my own identity needed to be erased to make me acceptable. I told myself love would be enough, that Garrett's devotion to me would eventually soften her heart. On our wedding day, Christine showed up in a white dress. White. To her son's wedding. She positioned herself in every family photo like she was the bride. Garrett laughed it off, said his mother was just eccentric. I swallowed my hurt and smiled through it because I loved him, because I believed we were building something stronger than his mother's prejudices. Then I got pregnant. It should have been the happiest time of our lives, but my body had other plans. At 7 months, complications hit hard. High blood pressure, pre-eclampsia warnings, bed rest orders. I was terrified of losing our baby. And through it all, I was still trying to wrap up critical work at the lab. Work that nobody knew the full extent of, not even Garrett. I'd tell him I was working on antibiotic research, which was true, but I never mentioned the magnitude of what we'd discovered. I kept meaning to tell him. The timing never felt right, and as the pregnancy got more complicated, it slipped further down my list of priorities. Garrett started spending more time with Christine during those difficult months. He said she was helping him prepare for fatherhood, teaching him what to expect. But I could feel him pulling away from me, inch by inch. The man who used to hold me every night started coming to bed hours after I'd fallen asleep. The man who used to ask about my day stopped listening to my answers. I blamed the pregnancy. I blamed my own anxiety. I blamed everything except what was really happening. He was letting his mother poison him against me. 12 hours ago, I went into emergency labor. My blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and the doctors said we needed an emergency C-section. I was terrified. They wheeled me into that operating room, and Garrett held my hand, but his eyes were somewhere else. He was on his phone constantly, texting someone. I was about to be cut open, about to bring our daughter into this world, and he couldn't put down his phone. But I pushed that hurt aside because in a few minutes I'd be holding our baby, and everything would change. Everything would get better. Lauren came into this world screaming, beautiful, perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark curly hair. They placed her on my chest for just a moment before taking her to be cleaned and checked. I looked at Garrett, expecting to see joy, expecting to see love. Instead, I saw his face frozen in something I couldn't quite read. Fear? Doubt? I was too exhausted to process it. The surgery had taken everything out of me. They stitched me up and moved me to recovery. Lauren was in a bassinet beside my bed, sleeping peacefully. I couldn't stop staring at her, this miracle we'd created. Garrett sat in the chair by the window, silent, still glued to his phone. And then Christine walked in without knocking, without asking if it was a good time. She walked straight to the bassinet and looked down at Lauren with an expression that made my blood run cold. "She's so dark," Christine said, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Garrett, look at her skin. Look at her features." She turned to me with these cold, calculating eyes. "Are you absolutely certain this is my son's child?" The world stopped spinning. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Garrett, waiting for him to defend me, to defend our daughter, to throw his mother out of that room. But he just stood there, mouth slightly open, saying nothing. The silence stretched on forever. My heart was breaking in real time, shattering into pieces so small I wasn't sure they could ever be put back together. "Garrett?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Say something." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes destroyed me. Doubt, actual doubt, about me, about our daughter, about everything we'd built together. I need some air," he stammered. "I need to think about this. I need to clear my head." Christine grabbed his arm. "Come on, son. Let's talk about this rationally. You can't make decisions when you're emotional." And then they left. They walked out of that hospital room together, leaving me alone with our hours-old daughter and a pain that had nothing to do with the surgery. I waited for him to come back. Surely he'd cool off and realize how insane this was. Surely he'd remember who I was, who we were. But an hour passed, then 2, then 4. My phone sat on the bedside table, and every time it lit up, my heart jumped. But it was never him. It was his mother, calling over and over. 17 missed calls. 0 from my husband. The nurse who'd been checking on me noticed the empty chair and tried to comfort me. She'd seen situations like this before, she said gently. Some men panic after birth. Some families have prejudices they can't hide. She didn't say what I already knew, that I'd been abandoned at my most vulnerable moment by the man who'd promised to love me forever. I was crying, holding Lauren close, when I looked up at the television mounted on the wall. The evening news was on, and a headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Pharmaceutical breakthrough. Revolutionary antibiotic receives FDA fast-track approval." My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed the remote with shaking hands and turned up the volume. The reporter was discussing a new drug that had shown unprecedented results in treating antibiotic-resistant infections. They mentioned clinical trials, success rates, and then something that made my entire world tilt on its axis. They mentioned the company behind it, a name I recognized because I'd signed papers 3 years ago without fully understanding what I was signing. I fumbled for my phone and dialed Dr. Octavia Winters, my mentor and the only person who knew the full story of my research. She answered on the first ring. "Diana, I've been trying to reach you. Are you watching the news? Have you seen—" "Octavia, what's happening? The company, the breakthrough is that it's your compound, Diana. Your discovery. The Phase 3 trials completed successfully 6 months ago. The FDA fast-tracked approval last week. We've been trying to reach you, but with your pregnancy complications, we didn't want to stress you. The company is going public tomorrow morning." She paused, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. "Diana, your share is worth $1.8 billion. You're about to become one of the richest women in America. The paperwork is being delivered to your home address tonight." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I looked down at Lauren, sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely unaware that her mother's entire life had just transformed. Here I was, abandoned and broken, holding a baby whose father had just questioned her paternity. And the universe had chosen this exact moment to reveal that I was a billionaire. Let me take you back 3 years so you understand how we got here. Before I met Garrett, before the wedding, before any of this, I was working late nights in the lab on something extraordinary. I'd isolated a unique compound from a deep-sea organism, something nobody had ever studied before. The potential applications were staggering. My mentor, Octavia, immediately recognized what we had. She advised me to file the patent under a shell company for protection while we ran trials. The pharmaceutical industry is cutthroat, she warned. People had been killed for less valuable discoveries. I needed anonymity. I agreed without fully understanding the implications. I signed papers, created the shell company, and buried myself in research. When I met Garrett a year later, I meant to tell him. I really did. But the moment never felt right. We were falling in love, and I didn't want money or potential wealth to complicate what we were building. Then the trials took longer than expected. Years passed. I kept thinking I'd tell him when everything was finalized, when I knew for certain what I had. I never imagined it would come to this, me discovering my worth on the same night he demonstrated he never understood it at all. Sitting in that hospital bed, I made phone calls. I called my lawyer. I called my financial advisor. I called Octavia back and told her about Garrett, about Christine, about being abandoned hours after giving birth. And I told her exactly what I wanted to do next. I wasn't interested in revenge, not really, but I was interested in protection, in boundaries, in making absolutely certain that my daughter would never question her worth the way I was questioning mine in that moment. At 4 a.m, Garrett finally came back. He appeared in my doorway looking disheveled and guilty, exactly like a man who'd realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He started with, "Diana, we need to talk." I made a mistake. I looked at him calmly. The crying had stopped hours ago. I'd moved past heartbreak into something colder, something more calculating. "You left our daughter's first hours of life to discuss whether she's really yours based on her skin color." My mother was in my head. I panicked. "But I love you, Diana. I love Lauren. I just—" "Leave," I said quietly. "Come back at 9 a.m., not before." He looked confused by my sudden strength, by the ice in my voice. "Diana, please, let me explain." 9 a.m., Garrett. Everything changes at 9 a.m. He had no idea what sunrise would bring, but I did. And I was going to make sure he, and his mother, understood exactly what they'd thrown away. By 7 a.m., every major news network was leading with the pharmaceutical story. Financial channels were discussing the breakthrough, the company's valuation, the mysterious lead scientist whose name had just been revealed, Dr. Diana Porter. My face appeared on screen after screen. My research, my discovery, my billions. Reporters camped outside my house. Hospital security moved me to a private VIP wing. My phone exploded with messages from colleagues, from old friends, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. And I knew Garrett was seeing it all. I knew Christine was watching her coffee-stained television in horror, understanding that the woman she'd called a gold digger could buy and sell her entire world without noticing the expense. At 8:30, my lawyer arrived with documents. Security had been upgraded. Lauren and I were now under protection. He explained that I'd be on Forbes' list next month, that we needed to discuss trusts and foundations and NDAs. I listened while nursing my daughter, remarkably calm considering my entire life had transformed overnight. At 9 a.m. exactly, Garrett arrived at the hospital, pushing through reporters who shouted questions about our relationship. Security stopped him at the entrance. "Mrs. Porter has upgraded her security. She'll decide if you can enter." I watched it happen on the television in my room, watched my husband's humiliation play out in front of cameras. I made him wait 20 minutes, not out of cruelty, but because I needed him to understand that access to me and our daughter was now a privilege, not a right. When security finally brought him in, he saw the transformed room, the lawyers, the new reality. He'd brought flowers. He'd prepared an apology speech. I cut him off before he could start. "Tell me about yesterday. Walk me through your thought process when your mother questioned our daughter's paternity." He stammered. He deflected. He tried to explain away the inexplicable. "Your mother questioned Lauren's paternity based on her skin color, and you said nothing. You left us. That's what happened." "I know, but I'm here now." "Because of the money. His face told me everything. While preparing my estate paperwork in recent weeks, I'd discovered that Garrett's hospital was facing bankruptcy, that he personally owed $400,000 in bad investments he'd never mentioned. He'd seen the news, done the math, and realized I could save him. I slid divorce papers across the table, already drafted. Generous child support, but strict boundaries. He had to complete parenting classes and therapy. Christine was banned from contact with Lauren until she completed counseling and wrote a formal apology that I would decide whether or not to accept. "You're punishing me with money I didn't even know you had," he said, his voice breaking. "No, I'm protecting my daughter from a man who abandoned her based on her skin color. The money is irrelevant to that fact." I let him hold Lauren. I watched genuine regret cross his face as he looked down at our daughter and understood what he'd thrown away. And then I gave him a choice that I needed to see how he'd handle. "Sign the custody agreement, take the support, stay in Lauren's life with boundaries. Or I'll give you $10 million, you sign away your rights, and you disappear. One payment, one exit." The room went silent. I was testing him. Would he take the money and run, or would he fight for his daughter? Long seconds passed. Lauren cooed softly in his arms. "I'll sign the custody agreement," he said finally, quietly. "I want to know her. I want to be better." For the first time since he'd walked out, I saw something genuine in his eyes. Remorse. Understanding. The beginning of growth. "Then we start from here," I told him. "You've got a long road ahead." 6 months have passed since that night. I'm sitting in my new office building now, headquarters of the Porter Foundation for Medical Research. We're creating opportunities for minority researchers, funding studies that larger companies ignore, changing the landscape of pharmaceutical research. Lauren is growing beautifully. She's happy and healthy, and has no idea yet how close she came to having a father who couldn't see past her skin color. Garrett visits regularly. He follows the boundaries. He's in therapy. He changed jobs, distanced himself from Christine. He's trying, genuinely trying to be the father Lauren deserves. That's all I can ask. I don't love him anymore. That died the night he walked out. But I respect his effort to become better. Christine tried to reconnect. I refused. She went to the press, tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone using wealth to punish her family. The public didn't buy it. They saw a grandmother who'd abandoned a newborn and a son who'd followed. She lost her social standing. Her friends distanced themselves. Last week, a letter arrived. A genuine apology, vulnerable and raw. I read it to Lauren, who grabbed at the paper with tiny hands. "Maybe one day, baby girl," I whispered. "But not today." People think this is a revenge story. It's not. The money didn't fix what broke that night, but it gave me the power to protect my daughter, to set boundaries, to ensure she grows up knowing her worth isn't dependent on anyone's validation. The universe didn't give me billions as compensation for my pain. It revealed who people truly were when I was at my lowest. Some people show up when times get hard. Others show you exactly who they are when you need them most. I'm holding Lauren now, watching the sunset through my office windows. She has Garrett's eyes and my smile. She's perfect. She'll grow up knowing she was wanted, knowing she was worth fighting for. And if she ever faces a moment like I did, she'll have the strength to stand alone, because I'll have taught her that love isn't about who stays when times are easy. It's about who you become when someone walks away. It's about knowing that your value exists independent of anyone's recognition of it. That night in the hospital, abandoned and broken, I discovered something more valuable than any bank account. I discovered that I could survive the worst betrayal and come out stronger. That I could hold my daughter and build an empire simultaneously. That sometimes the universe doesn't rescue you. It just reveals what you've been capable of all along. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to find strength when someone walked away, drop a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because next week's story will remind you that karma doesn't always arrive when we expect it, but it always arrives. Hit that notification bell, and remember, You are worth more than anyone's doubt. I'll see you in the next one.